Okay. Can everybody see that? Kyle, can you see that?
Yeah, it's coming through clear. How do I sound? Am I too loud?
Sound
Well,
great to me.
okay, good stuff. Yeah, I might get super excited because I'm going to talk about water chestnut. So everyone's going to have to deal with that. But I'll do my best to kind of cover, the main points. And, at the end, obviously, we'll have some room for questions if anybody has any questions following. So we're going to talk a little bit about European water chestnut and the water chestnut program that we have at Ducks Unlimited, and some of the control and surveillance that we've done over the years, as well as some new tools that we're working on. And Sarah had mentioned earlier through the Green Shovels Collaborative, some new work that's being done with eDNA and drones. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of that drone aspect of some new tools we're working on for surveillance of invasive species. But before you go in, just a real quick background of who I am. So I'm a biologist with Ducks Unlimited Canada. I've been lucky to be in the invasive species field for I guess close to 14 years now, working on a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different plants, and there's a wide diversity of invasives and invasive projects to work on, which I guess in respect can impact our own native biodiversity. But it's pretty interesting. We have from chemical, biological, and mechanical control, different options for different plants, and everything's a little bit different. So just kind of glean some of the experiences that we've had with Ducks Unlimited. So Ducks Unlimited, just a little bit about us. Sorry, Darissa, can you move to the next slide? Thanks. So Ducks Unlimited Canada has been actively conserving wetland habitat for over 80 years in Canada, and delivering this through habitat conservation programs. Here in Ontario, we've been active since 1974, and we've completed over 4,000 habitat project segments across the province and have conserved almost 1 million acres of wetlands to date. Our mission is really to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands and associated habitats in North America's waterfowl, for North America's waterfowl, and which in turn that is beneficial for wildlife, people, and our environment. So with that in mind, we deal with invasives in a bunch of different ways. We tackle them through through policy development, some science-based research, ongoing education outreach, fostering partnerships like the ones that we have with members here that are giving some presentations, and through active habitat restoration. And in this case, a lot of that through invasive species control projects. Next slide, please. So a little bit about European water chestnut. Just to right off the bat, there's water chestnut you can get in the stores. These ones are not related whatsoever. This one's more of a nut that, like a fruit that's created by the plant, whereas the one that we eat in the stores is a tuber, like a bulb of an emergent species. So that said, I could go off on a whole other conversation about if you could eat them or not, but we won't get into that. So European water chestnut, it is an annual floating leafed aquatic plant. So annual being that it grows from seed every year, develops new seeds, and then dies back at the end of the year. So those populations are dependent on those seeds germinating and keeping that local population going. It is native to Eurasia and Africa, and was introduced in the late 1800s because it's such a unique looking ornamental species. And it has a really interesting growth habit as well. After a series of intentional and accidental releases, water chestnut has slowly moved its way throughout the Northeast United States. And most notably was the Hudson River and the Mohawk and rivers in Lake Champlain, where it was able to kind of spread rapidly throughout New York, and is likely, one of the reasons that we've had some pop up in Ontario. So, on the south shoreline of Lake Ontario, we have New York State, and there's several tributaries and embayments where water chestnut has been historically found, throughout the last couple decades. More recently, so in Ontario, really our populations are pretty small and isolated in comparison to the US. And they were first observed in the Ottawa River back in 2006 at Voyageur Provincial Park. That population's been managed by Ontario Parks since. And we've had other ones pop up as well in the last decade. And back in 2011, it was identified in the Kingston and Frontenac Islands area. And then from there, a couple of other populations throughout the Rideau River and local to Kingston. And that's where Ducks Unlimited got involved. We have a Kingston-based office, and we're nicely situated to provide that control and surveillance work, to help with the early detection, rapid response to remove water chestnut within the Kingston area. So this species, it spreads predominantly by seed, and then secondarily by rosettes. And so these rosettes, like the floating leaves of the plants that I'll talk about in a second, if those rosettes can break away from, are broken off from the roots, they can free float on top of the water, and the wind will take them where they go. And really they enjoy those nutrient-rich, slow-moving waters that you have in lakes, wetlands, and back bays. So they find a place to settle, and they start a family, I guess. And so really they love that soft substrate with full sun, and they typically grow in about 1 to 2 meters of water. Next slide. So what does this thing look like? Water chestnut, all around, it's pretty unique looking. We don't have anything that really looks very similar to it in Ontario for our native plants. The floating leaves are diamond shaped with tooth margins, and the leaves are arranged on as a rosette at the surface. You'll notice they have these long petioles on those leaves, and there's actually, it widens in the center, and it creates a float that helps keep those leaves up at the surface. You can see multiple rosettes per plant, like up to a dozen typically, and usually they reach about 30 centimeters in diameter when they've completed growing. They also have submersed leaves that are completely different than the leaves that are floating on the surface. And these are feather-like and finely divided, and they kind of act like adventitious roots as well, and able to pull some nutrients from the water. Flowers are very small, 4 petals, and borne singly in the axils of the floating leaves. And those sections turn in, when the seeds are developed, they have like a hard seed that it's about the size of a squash ball with 4 sharp spines that kind of stick out. Each rosette can produce about 10 to 15 seeds, so you can potentially get 100 to 150 seeds per plant each year. And these seeds, they're very big, and they're very, instead of having a lot of seeds where they just disperse like crazy, these ones put a lot of energy in making highly viable seeds that can stay viable for up to 10 years. And kind of neat with their shape too, it allows them to kind of anchor themselves into the sediment. So if you have, when they germinate in the spring, once the water temperatures reach about 10 degrees, it'll shoot up a fresh rosette to the surface. As that's happening, it starts to grow roots and to stabilize the plant. In the meantime, that seed will act like an anchor. Once the seed it's used up all of its energy within the seed, you have this husk of the seed that will float up to the surface and can wash up on shore. Next slide, please. So why are these things a problem? Water chestnut can quickly create dense floating mats, and they're capable of intercepting majority of the light, about 95% of the sunlight available to the submerged species below that canopy. And they can grow rapidly to cover space. If given the space, morphologically, they will, depending on how much cover they have available to them, if it's an open water area, they can grow big. If it's not, then they kind of stay a bit smaller and kind of fill up whatever space they can. So it's kind of interesting, like the populations change depending on where you are. So this can negatively impact habitat for waterfowl, as well as other wildlife and fish. Decaying plants can lead to lower dissolved oxygen levels and lead to fish kills. They can also impact navigation and recreational use. So this picture here is actually the Erie Canal in New York. And it's pretty choked out. So it'd be difficult to drive a boat through that. And then lastly, the seeds themselves can be really sharp when they're stepped on. And even at times when we're pulling plants out of the water, it can be pretty painful. Next slide, please. So as an annual plant, and I mentioned earlier, it produces, it puts a lot of its effort in producing large viable seeds to establish and sustain its population. So really, they die off every year. They're dependent on that seed bank to keep going every year. So control of the species is really focused on depleting the establishment of these seed banks and limiting the production of, so basically getting rid of the seeds that are already in the seed bank and then stopping the plants that are currently growing from reaching that ability to release new seeds to replenish those seed banks. And this really works in our favor with the species because typically, Rob's going to talk about water soldier, which it grows very rapidly vegetatively rather than sexually within Ontario. And this one's more, we're seeing more of an issue from, it relies more on that reproduction sexually rather than fragmentation or other vegetative means. So with that in mind, year after year control is important because if left unchecked, it can rapidly take over in an area. Understanding the growth and the habit of the species is also vital for a control program. And, like all species, there's unique challenges that come with it and efforts that need to be tailored to their specific needs. So in Ontario, we use 3 different methods of control. We focus on hand pulling, which is literally grabbing the rosettes and slowly pulling them up by hand. You can they actually have pretty weak roots, and being aquatic plants, they really rely on that water column, it's not as, they don't have to be as rigid as, say, plants that are emerged out of the water. So they're pretty easy to pull if the population's small enough. That is our favorite method of doing so. Other options, you can use a harvester in areas like Voyageur Provincial Park, where this bottom photo is from. You can see the extent of the issue compared to a picture of me pulling our little populations that are left at Wolf Island. So those bigger boats are helpful for removing the plants in larger populations and basically cutting the plants below the surface. Another method is chemical control, which is being performed at one site in the Greater Cataraqui River. So I'm going to really focus just on Wolf Island for the most part, and kind of where we've been moving, with the Water Chestnut program. So since 2014, we've been coordinating the European Water Chestnut program, and this consists of actively controlling the known populations that we have at Wolf Island, and this is just off the first and biggest of the 1,000 lakes in the St. Lawrence River, right at the end of Eastern Lake Ontario. And with this, we also do some ongoing education outreach on the species. During the initial year of the program, it was funded by the Invasive Species Center, followed by the Ministry of Natural Resources through some funding from the Canada-Ontario Agreement. We also received some funding from Parks Canada in 2019 to help with the populations within the Rideau Canal system. As mentioned before, our preferred method is really hand pulling, especially with Wolf Island. The populations are small enough that we can stay on top of this. So focusing with our efforts there, basically we go out and we do visual surveys for the plant and remove what we can within the time. And then once our control efforts are completed for the year, we focus our attention on performing surveillance for new infestations in areas of suitable habitat that are nearby, as well as, in a typical year, anywhere from Gananoque up to Brighton through Eastern Lake Ontario. So this work is typically performed, so the first 6 years it was performed from 2014 to 2019, we saw an 83% reduction in water chestnut at Wolf Island. Unfortunately, this work was not continued in 2020 due to some COVID restrictions and mobilization of our staff. And we were able to return this year in 2021 to pick up where we left off. Thankful though, in 2020, Parks Canada had taken over the Rideau Canal related work on our behalf, since they were able to mobilize and get out on the water to do the work. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thanks. So basically what we do every year, we perform surveillance for the plant. It's typically performed by visually paddling and searching through the areas that we know the populations exist, and by canoe and boat. And this is usually done in July and August when the plants are up at the surface and actively growing. So control and ongoing surveillance kind of go hand in hand, as we're paddling around doing the work. But over time, the area where we're finding the plants is getting smaller and smaller. So we're, over time with the program, we were still spending a lot of time covering the entire area. But, we thought maybe there's ways to make this a bit more, seamless in terms of our time and effort that's going towards removal. So in 2021, Ducks Unlimited acquired a couple of small drones to collect communications material for various projects. And our GIS specialists saw an opportunity to use the drones to collect imagery through the areas that we know water chestnut exists on Wolf Island, and try to reduce our search effort on the water. And so we were able to fly the drone over 4 main sites that we do control within Wolf Island. We know where the plants have historically been found. And this was performed over 3 days. And we were able to take this imagery and stitch it together in order to inform our control efforts. So the picture there on the left, you can see this is an aerial imagery from above of, there's some arrows there that are pointing at some water chestnut. It's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see how it's difficult to visualize these plants from the water as well. Like if the conditions are a little bit off, if it's wavy, really windy, we're off the water and unable to see the plants. You can be a few meters, maybe a couple 10 meters off and not be able to see them. So this really, we think is up in the ante for us. Next slide, please. So really our methods in this summer were pretty rudimentary. However, they did provide a proof of concept that image collection was extremely helpful. We were able to easily identify the water chestnut based on unique leaf pattern and mark the locations of the plants and upload that to a handheld GPS. We also developed some field maps to help while we're out in the field. And it also reduced our time in the field. So typically we're controlling water chestnut at Wolf Island and performing surveillance at the same time. And it takes about 20 days with 2 staff on the water. And this was reduced to 15 days. It also allowed us to utilize our wind days where we're not going to be out on the water doing some active control. And this allowed us to spend that time reviewing imagery. And usually this is a wasted day for the project and we're working on other stuff. But overall, there were really no major surprises this year. The drones also provided some assistance in, identifying plants in areas that were very difficult to reach, or checking areas, making sure that, we didn't have to spend extra time heading down certain channels because everything, there were no plants in those areas. Anecdotally, this year, we did see an increase in the amount of water chestnut removed. It's not really surprising considering the lack of control last year. So we saw a little bit of a bump from the previous year. As well, we picked them up later in the season, so they were quite bigger than we had in the past. So we're still working on the results of everything. It'll be released likely in January. Next slide, please. So with that proof of concept in place and our initial surveys completed, DUC actually received some funding through the Green Shovels Collaborative to develop an aerial image collection and processing tool method, and to aid in our water chestnut detection. In order to do so, we've also reached out to Ryerson University to assist us in developing and testing methods for automatic detection of European water chestnut, and doing this through using unsupervised classification or object-based image analysis. So a picture here on the right, there's a segmented drone imagery photo. And really this is just a sample of what was sent over from our students that are working on this project to show just image classification based on shape and color for the most part. And so we're working through different methods for image classification, and hopefully we can auto detect things through this method. And it's also, they're working through an overview and recommending various cloud-based processing options. So once we have all the imagery, we have to stitch all this together. This can be a cumbersome process, especially, it takes a lot of memory of a computer to be able to run. And the processing times can take quite a while. They're looking into cloud-based options for us as well. So we would basically be able to take the imagery within the day, upload that to a cloud-based processing system, and then be able to hopefully overnight this runs the methodology, and the next day you're able to review the imagery. So it's pretty exciting stuff. We're excited to be working with Ryerson on this project and looking forward to see the results. Our hope is really that this will increase the likelihood of identifying new populations of water chestnut in a more efficient manner. Next slide, please. So really the next steps with this, we're going to continue to build on the success to date with the European Water Chestnut Program. We're pretty confident with the approach of hand pulling with this, and really the inclusion of drone imagery is something that we see as a very helpful tool moving forward. It allows us to not only be able to get a realistic view of the snapshot of the entire water, it allows us to get baseline imagery before and after control and treatment, and really like test out the efficacy of the work that we're doing. So next steps with that too is really to see if we can determine if we can classify water chestnut through this imagery on a larger scale. So being able to fly new areas and be able to identify if plants are located, assist in early detection, rapid response in that respect, and really to determine if it is cost effective as well. Things are leaning that way, but once we work in our staff time as well as the cost for the programming, to see if this is something that is a very effective, cost-effective tool for invasive species. As well, we're looking at using drones for integrating into other programming that we have, if it's for invasive species, for other species that we work with, our various restoration projects, or assisting our engineers with developing and engineering infrastructure for dams. So yeah, with that, we're going to continue to partner and collaborate on new tools and work with our partners. And just from my own experience working within the invasive species field, every invasive species is unique. It has its own set of ways that it can explode in population, and it has its own unique types of control that work. And then every invasion is unique too. So, what works at one site might not work at another. So you have to be creative. And a lot of that too is dependent on collaboration and connection. So we work really closely with partners across the province, as well as, Ducks Unlimited across Canada, and partners even in Michigan and Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York from time to time, and share experiences where we can. And yeah, with that, next slide. That is what I've got on water chestnut and our current program and the drones. I'd like to thank the ISC for having us here today to talk about this, and Darissa for putting this on. And as well as special thanks to our Ryerson University students.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you for your patience and teaching us about water chestnut and the cool ways you can use technology to survey for it. That's awesome. We do have a couple of questions if you don't mind answering.
Sure.
We have one submitted anonymously. Are there any environmental characteristics at these sites that make it more vulnerable to establishment of water chestnut? For example, water chemistry or turbidity?
Sure. Oh, that's a great question. So, um, for the most part, I wouldn't say there's much of an issue that we've seen. From the I'm thinking of the literature, there's not much that's coming to mind with respect to that with water chemistry, other than, you know, there's limitations on in the Hudson River as you get closer to you know, the tidal influence and having higher salinity in the water. But other than that, I mean, they do very well in our water here. And as a floating leaf aquatic plant too, they have that benefit of their interest is like any plant, you want to have light water and nutrients. They've got an abundance of water, you'd hope, as an aquatic plant. And so what they want is they want to hit that light. So if it's turbid, they're kind of at benefit because first thing they do is they shoot that rosette up to the surface to capture as much sunlight as they can. Other species, and you know, like water milfoil, for example, if the water's clear and deep, they won't necessarily reach the surface, but in muddy, shallower water, they're going to reach the surface and blanket the surface to get as much sunlight as possible. So the one thing with a lot of invasives that I've seen, you know, that we typically have a lot of problems with is that morphologically, like they can change depending on the I guess the conditions that they're presented, and they're just good at what they do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, was there another part to that?
No, that was
Oh.
it for that first question. We do have another question. If a community member were to find water chestnut out in a lake that they frequent or a river that they frequent, are there any restrictions for a community member to hand pull water chestnut along the shoreline themselves?
Hey, that is a great question, and one that so recently I'm going to get my timelines messed up here, but last year there was a prevention and response plan. Might have been this spring it was released. It's been COVID. It's hard to tell the difference between 2020 and 2021.
The last 2 years are just one whole year.
One whole year. But we do have a prevention and response plans that we can use that were provided by the province. So basically, you know, we have up until recently, because this is a prohibited species under the Invasive Species Act, you had to have a permit in order to control it. Obviously, that's going to limit a lot of opportunity for doing some control. But if you're a landowner who has is on the water or working on behalf of somebody who's on the water, you're able to control, pull water chestnut and remove it from the water. There are certain restrictions with that. It would be best to check out the Ontario government's invasive species page to get the specifics on the prevention and response plan.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you were looking into using this technology for other invasive species. What are the limitations to that? Like for water chestnut, you pointed out you're using color as one way to determine if it's water chestnut. Would that be a limitation looking at other species if there's multiple species with the same color emitting or things like that?
Sure. Yeah, and that's the exploration that we're working through right now. And part of that too, you know, for example, Phragmites is a good example. There is a bit of literature that's out there now. And so really, you know, every plant is different and it's identifying the signature. So from a multi-spectral image classification, you know, you're looking at a specific I'm going to butcher this, but a specific wavelength of color that the plant would release, or, you know, it would be based on shape. In this case, for water chestnut, image-based is kind of nice because it has such a unique leaf shape. You know, yeah, every species is different. And there's a lot of work that goes into each one when it comes to classifying through imagery. And it's just a matter of, the technology is getting better, and being able to train the AI behind it is getting better as well. And all of this is way beyond me, but I'm just trying to keep the people that are doing it motivated.
Awesome. Well, you're doing groundbreaking work then. All right, I don't see any other questions right now, and in the interest of time, I think we will continue along. Are you going to stick around for the remainder of this session?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So if there's any other questions for Kyle, you can type them into the chat and maybe we'll get to them at the end of this session. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us. Okay, so next up, we have Robert Mcgowan. I'm just going to bring up his slideshow here. Rob, are you able to unmute your mic?
I am.
Yay!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's nice to see you again, Darissa.
Well, I can't see you, but it's nice to hear you. Thank you for your patience with everything today.
No worries.
All right, so like I said, we have Robert Mcgowan here, who for the past 8 years has worked as the management technician at the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, the Invading Species Awareness Program, where he is the lead for the monitoring, surveillance, and control of the water soldier populations across Ontario. So today he'll be talking about the early detection and rapid response on water soldier in Red Horse Lake in Eastern Ontario. Are you able to see the presentation, Rob?
I am not able to see it.
You are not. I should share my screen. How about now?
I am.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thanks for having me today. My name is Robert Mcgowan. I'm the management technician at the Invading Species Awareness Program under the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a small case study about water soldier and the early detection and rapid response at Red Horse Lake. If you go to the next slide, please. So just a quick overview. We're just going to go through what water soldier is, what kind of habitat it likes, the morphology of the plant, the ecology of the plant, the reproduction, and then we're going to get into the small case study of the early detection and rapid response at Red Horse Lake. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background on who we are. So the Invading Species Awareness Program was formed in 1992, and it was a partnership between the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters and the Ontario Ministry of Northern Development, Mines and Natural Resources and Forestry. That's a long one. And it was established to increase and address the increasing threats posed by invasive species in Ontario. Our objectives are to generate education and awareness of aquatic and terrestrial invasive species, to address key pathways contributing to introductions and spread of these species, and facilitate monitoring and early detection initiatives for invasive species found within Ontario. And this all kind of started in 1992 when the zebra mussels really kind of blew up, and it was formed to give the public a tool to report, and so we can track the species. And from there, we just built and we started to track all the invasive species in Ontario. Next slide, please. So let's get into what water soldier is. So water soldier is an invasive perennial aquatic plant that is native to Europe and Northwest Asia. The first known wild population in North America was found in the Trent River in 2008. Water soldier was used as an ornamental plant in water gardens and was sold at nurseries. And this is the likely source of the introduction to the Trent River. Why is it a problem? So water soldier forms dense mats of floating and submerged vegetation. It crowds out our native vegetation, resulting in decreased biodiversity. Water soldier has the potential to alter surrounding water chemistry, which may harm phytoplankton and other aquatic organisms. Dense floating mats of water soldier hinder recreational activities such as like boating, angling, swimming, hunting. And the sharp serrated leaf edges can cut people that come in contact with the plant. And you see the picture on the right-hand side there. You can see that margin of spines on that one leaf there, and it can cut you, and it can get pretty nasty. So you should take caution when you're handling those emergent stiff plant leaves. Next slide, please. So the habitat, the typical habitat of water soldier is still or slow moving water. It's not found in very shallow water or fast moving water, or in areas where the water fluctuates greatly due to the sinking and floating behavior of the plant. The plant likes to be situated and root in soft, muddy sediments. So your typical back bay areas where you're gonna find your lily pads and whatnot is its preferred habitat. Under conditions of low light, the leaves don't develop enough gas in their air canals and intercellular spaces to become emergent. And it's normal to find water soldier as a bottom dwelling plant in certain light conditions. The plant likes to live in 0.5 to 1.5 meters of water. And you can see this map up here. All the red areas are where water soldier are, and you can see the deep purple color is the deeper water, the navigational channel. We typically don't find water soldier in those areas. Where we find them in those kind of shallow areas that are about 0.5 to 1.5 meters of water. Next slide, please. So water soldier appears as two different forms. It's a submergent and emergent. So the middle picture is the submergent form, and both the pictures on the right and the left are the emergent form. The submergent form overgrows the bottom of the littoral zone and has long, bright green, brittle, spirally twisted mature leaves that have a serrated margin of sharp spines. The emergent form breaches the water surface, and it has stiff, erect leaves with serrated spines on the margin. Both forms of water soldier produce turions and offsets, which we'll talk about in the next slide. In the late spring, rosettes from the roots that grow into the sediment, loosely anchoring the plant, and at the same time, they start to form offsets. So the rosette leaves can grow up to 60 centimeters in length. They're bright green in color. The leaves are sword-shaped, rigid, brittle, and have those sharp spines. The flowers are white with 3 petals, which we really don't see a lot of flowering plants here in Ontario because I don't know why, but the main means of reproduction is by means of the offsets and turions versus seed production. So the plant doesn't really use that seed to reproduce and spread. It uses those turions and offsets. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry. So ecology. So seasonal changes in temperature result in ecological and morphological changes to the water soldier plants. Water soldier becomes submergent in the winter, in the water in the winter, or sorry, the fall, and it overwinters as a rootless state. You can see the outside leaves are brown on these plants here. And this is what helps with its sinking behavior in the winter. So those outside leaves die off, they become waterlogged, and it helps to drag those emergent plants down to the bottom of the lake to overwinter. The outer leaves lose their photosynthetic gas, and which helps it become buoyant in the summer. And in the fall, these leaves lose the gas and become waterlogged, which helps to sink the plant. In the winter, the leaves together with the stem perform a storage function, keeping starch in their cells, and this helps it to survive over winter. So this plant's considered an evergreen. It really never dies. It overwinters under the ice and is ready to go. As soon as that ice comes off, it's ready to start growing again. So in the spring, as a rootless rosette rises towards the water surface and forms new additional roots, those offsets become active and the vegetative reproduction begins again. Next slide, please. So water soldier relies primarily on vegetative reproduction through the offsets and turions, which you can see in some of these pictures here. The bottom left-hand picture, you can see those 4 groupings are turions, and the one on the right is an offset. And in the picture on the bottom right-hand corner, with the red circle around it, you can see that that's still an offset. So it grows on the mother plant until it's fairly large, and then it will break away, and that offset will start growing its own turions and offsets. So one plant could potentially have 5 to 10 offsets on it. So you can see how this plant could really spread and grow quickly. So next slide, please. So that's kind of a little bit of background on the plant. So now we're going to talk about detections in Ontario. So most of the water soldier detections have been made in the southern Ontario region, from southwestern Ontario to eastern Ontario. We really haven't seen it really north of, I'd say, Muskoka. It's basically most of the infestation has occurred down in southern Ontario. So water soldier and public waterways, we've had 3 occurrences of water soldier in public waterways. The first occurrence, as I said before, was in September 2008, where water soldier was discovered in the Trent Severn waterway in the hamlet of Trent River. The second occurrence was in 2015. This was in the Black River, which is a tributary of Lake Simcoe, and we collaboratively worked with the Aurora District MNRF and took some rapid response, and we have what we think we have eradicated water soldier from that river system. We do a monitoring every year, or more like surveillance every year, to make sure that it hasn't reestablished. And so far we're looking good. And the third wild occurrence was in our focus of today, Red Horse Lake, which is north of Gananoque. Next slide, please. So this next little few slides are just going to demonstrate why rapid response is so important for water soldier infestations. It's going to demonstrate what happens when you don't control it and what happens when you do control it. So you can see here in summer 2013, we have some water soldiers sporadically in this bay along the littoral zone against the shore. You know, there's a lot more there than what you see, but the emergent plants are quite obvious. Next slide, please. So you can see in summer 2014, this is from the landowner's pictures. She has taken this picture, and you can see how it's really filled in. Now, these are those dense mats we were talking about. So 2014, it's filled in, and it's starting to grow out into the bay. Next slide, please. So you can see in the spring of 2015, the landowner has to change her perspective to give us a full scope of what's going on. So all that littoral zone and shoreline area is filled with water soldier, but now it's crept out beyond her dock. So rapidly spreading these dense mats. There's nothing you can do. She can't even park her boat here. So let's take a fast forward to the next slide, please. And you can see the same year, that was the spring 2015. This is August 2015. You can see how fast this water soldier has kind of taken over this back bay. And this is before any treatment happened. And this poor guy lifting that motor up, I don't think he's going anywhere really fast there. That would be very difficult to get that boat out to open water. So 2014, we started large-scale herbicide treatments. Not everything was treated, but in 2015, I believe this area is treated. And if we go to the next slide, so you can see after 2 years of treatment, There's still water soldier there. You can see some along the shoreline. There's probably some out in the bay there, but this guy can get his boat out now, and there's a lot less water soldier. And if you go to the next slide, July 2018, pretty much water soldier free, and this bay has pretty much been water soldier free since then. Every year we monitor it, and this year we saw the same results. There hasn't been much water soldier there. So just keep in mind, this is the Trent Severn Waterway, not Red Horse Lake, and I'm just using this as a kind of tool to show you how fast this plant can get out of hand. So let's talk about Red Horse Lake. You can see here, there's a small population of water soldier against the dock there. We got a call from a resident that didn't know what the plant was, and we went there very, very quickly because it's really about a straight line, 150 to 170 kilometers away from any of the infestations we've had experienced so far. So if you go to the next slide, please. So where is Red Horse Lake? So Red Horse Lake is located in Eastern Ontario. It's about halfway between Toronto and Montreal. It's 24 kilometers north of Highway 401 and the Thousand Islands International Bridge. It's located between the villages of Lyndhurst and Lansdowne. Red Horse Lake is one of 28-kilometer long chain of lakes that comprises the Upper Gananoque River system. Next slide, please. So in August 2020, the Invading Species Awareness Program hotline received a report of water soldier on Red Horse Lake. A concerned citizen that owns a cottage resort there noticed a plant that he wasn't familiar with. He did some research and he determined that it was water soldier. He contacted us at the Invading Species Awareness Program, and he reported it. And we requested that he send in some pictures, and he sent the picture in on the right, and we confirmed that it was water soldier. Next step, please. So rapid response, it sounds easy, but it isn't always. I'm sure Kyle can attest to this. I know that he's had some rapid response projects on the go, and there's just something you're really not prepared for all the time. So one of the first steps in rapid response is a positive identification, which we just did with the gentleman who owns the cottage resort, and the identification of it's a priority invasive species. The first step is for us to contact the MNRF, and that was done. And we set up a video conference because, keep in mind, this is during COVID, so we didn't really know how we were going to handle this. And the meeting was set up on how we're going to move forward with this newly discovered infestation. So the decision was made that OFAH and the Invading Species Awareness Program would conduct a site visit to assess the size and density of the water soldier populations. Next slide, please. So the site visit. So the site visit informed us of the size, density, and the number of water soldier populations that we'd have to plan to manage with the hopes of eradication. Although the population was larger than we had initially thought, we only found the one population. And contact with the landowner adjacent to the population was made, and information on the seriousness and the presence of the water soldier was explained, and information and contacts were exchanged with the landowner. We asked the landowner not to disturb the population, as we were going to be returning to take on management activities. Through surveillance while we were there, we found a few scattered plants around the main population, and we removed them. Next slide, please. So after the site visit, there was further discussion between the OFH, MNRF, the Invasive Species Center, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the decision was made to treat the water soldier population with herbicide. And this decision was made with help from our previous experiences with the populations of water soldier in the Black River, which we successfully eradicated. as far as we know to date. Quick action and collaboration led to that eradication in the Black River in 2016, and we were hopeful that we would yield the same results with this population. Next slide, please. So on September 15th of 2020, we returned to Red Horse Lake to install a barrier that would contain the main water soldier population. Unfortunately, this barrier was supposed to prevent any movement of the plants because of wind action, wave action, but the nature of where the water soldier population was the drop off was so steep that we weren't able to actually install the barrier. So we abandoned the barrier and we did further surveillance, and we removed more plants. You can see my colleague there scuba diving and picking up some plants in those kind of shallower areas. And you know, those single plants that have dislodged from those main populations can be difficult to find, and actually getting in the water and removing them is a good way to do that. Next slide, please. So while we were on site, we delineated the population to prepare for treatment. There was a buffer added to the original layout. This has been recommended by professionals that we consulted with in the past. And the reason for this is the Gananoque watershed and this chain of 28 kilometers of lakes. Water moves through there. There is really no dam system. So water just moves through these chain of lakes. And if you add a buffer around this population, it gives it enough residency time for the herbicide to be effective in these flowing water systems. So next slide, please. So we were able to hire a herbicide applicator in 2020 and treat the water soldier populations with herbicide. Rapid response efforts like this are paramount to prevent the establishment and further spread of these species, especially water soldier being a floating plant. You know, if one plant dislodges and you have a flowing water system, that plant can just float all the way down those 28 kilometers, and the Gananoque upper watershed dumps into the St. Lawrence River, which wouldn't be good. So let's go to the next slide, please. So jumping forward to 2021, we returned to Red Horse Lake to assess the efficacy of the 2020 herbicide treatment. So you can see the picture on the left is the 2020 picture pre-treatment, and the picture on the right is the 2021 post-treatment picture. And I know it really doesn't look like there's much difference, but the population was much smaller, much less dense, and you can see the color difference. Water soldier has a really vibrant green color and it just sticks out. And you can see that these plants on the right-hand side with the picture taken in 2020, 2021, it's dull. So we've never had a successful one treatment kind of silver bullet. We hit it once and we've been successful. So even though the water soldier is still present, it doesn't look like it's doing too well. It doesn't look as healthy, and we're hopeful that what we've done this year will help just kind of put the final nail in the coffin. Next picture, please, or slide, please. So surveillance of Red Horse Lake in 2021. So from our surveillance around Red Horse Lake and down to the connected water bodies, we found and removed 3 small satellite populations that were away from the main population this year. 2 were immediately adjacent to the main population. The other, the cottage owner that tipped us off on the original population is really keen, and he does his own surveillance around the lake, and he tipped us off to this other population across the lake. It was very difficult to find, but after a few attempts, we found it, and we manually removed it. Next slide, please. Along with this, surveillance and herbicide treatment. And as part of the Green Shovel Collaborative, we've been taking eDNA samples. On Red Horse Lake, we collected eDNA samples at 5 sites with 2 replicates at each site. The in-field eDNA kits were provided by the Invasive Species Center. This is the 3rd occurrence of the eDNA sampling collected for Water Soldier in 2021. Samples were taken from the Black River and Lake Simcoe in April. We did a round in the summer on the Trent Severn Waterway. We did Red Horse Lake in August, and recently we did a pre and post eDNA collection on the Trent Severn Waterway and Bay of Quinte. And this is all being done to help inform policymakers and managers on how to best move forward to manage the species. It also gives us another tool in our toolbox to do some quick and dirty work where if we suspect something being there, we can go take some water samples, eDNA, send them to the lab and get the results back if there's a positive hit or not, versus having 2 people in a boat for days upon days scouring waterways. So it's hopefully going to be a really helpful tool in the future. And I look forward to the results of all of our collection that we've done this year. Next slide, please. So you can see here, we've delineated, while we were there in August, we delineated the 2 areas where there were water soldier found. A picture on the left, that's the same treatment area as 2020, but this one treatment area on the right was where we found those new plants and removed them. We weren't positive that we got all the plants. You can see the shape of the polygon is really narrow and long. And this is because this lake, there's a significant drop off right away. So it's that typical water soldier habitat, 1 to 2 meters of water, 1.5 meters of water, but then it drops off right to 20, 30 feet. So this is why there's a abrupt stop to the polygon, and you can kind of see the color change in the water as well. So next slide, please. So moving forward with Red Horse Lake, we're going to work over the winter to build a plan for surveillance and get an actual monitoring protocol in place, we hope. We're going to touch base with agencies and the public and engage them in outreach and education in the Gananoque watershed region, and hopefully move forward with this EDRR program, and hopefully it's successful. Next slide, please. So really the send home message here for me is collaboration. None of this rapid response work is going to work with one agency trying to do it themselves. I think that Kyle kind of hit on this as well. So I've been working on the Water Soldier project for the past 8 years, and we're all proud of the achievements we have accomplished, and working collaboratively towards a goal of eradicating water soldier from Ontario and helping to prevent new introductions has been quite successful. We've learned from our previous years, and we've applied those lessons to the next year. And I think that all of us working together on this is the only way that we're going to achieve, the prevention of and introduction and spread of these species in Ontario. Next slide, please. And we're going to continue the response. So we have an interagency working group that will continue to work together to address water soldier, the existing and new populations that arise. We're going to engage agencies and the public in education outreach of invasive species. In terms of management approaches, we will adapt according to our circumstances as understanding of the plant evolves over time. We'll continue doing our research, policy development, and take our experience with control and management and apply them to future projects. And we're excited and hopeful to build off the recent success we've seen in the past years. So I'm hoping that we can move forward and be successful.
Great, thank you so much, Rob. I'm just going to do a time check here. It is 12 o'clock, so if anyone needs to leave and head out for lunch or have any obligations, go ahead. But if not, we can take some questions and go through those. Rob, I have a question for you here. In the 2018 restoration to now, have you been in contact at all with the landowner, and have they noticed any reestablishment of fish populations or native plant species into the area surrounding the shoreline since the water soldier population has subsided?
So I personally have not had any contact with the landowner, but in the Trent Severn Waterway, we have a yearly monitoring program that goes on. So we have a systematic monitoring program where we monitor the same point intercepts every year. I believe for the Trent Severn Waterway, we're in the upwards of 12,000 point intercepts that we monitor. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of research done on fish and wildlife and how water soldier has affected them. We do know that we have seen trends over time where water soldier has been eradicated from. We are seeing the establishment of some native species, but from my experience, we're seeing an establishment of some other invasive species. So early spring, you have a lot of curly-leaf pondweed coming up where water soldier used to be established, and into the mid to late summer, you're seeing a lot of Eurasian water milfoil pop up. With that said, there are certain areas, specifically in Percy's Reach, where we had a large water soldier population, and we have, since we started treating with herbicide, we've seen a return of wild rice. And I'm not talking about a small patch, we're talking about a 50-hectare patch of wild rice popped up. So that's good news. But I really can't answer the question on any fish and wildlife returns or how water soldier has affected or displaced them in any way.
Perfect, thank you. Victoria, I do see your hand up. I'm hoping that our tech team is able to unmute you. Are you there? Victoria, I think you are able to unmute yourself now.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put my hand up. I hit the button by accident.
No worries, thank you. Okay, I have a question for you, Rob. Are there any transferable lessons with this early detection and rapid response from the water soldier monitoring and control in Ontario that other invasive aquatic plants, or that you can use for other invasive aquatic plants? For instance, if hydrilla was discovered in Ontario.
I really believe that the collaboration aspect is the most important. Having those supporting agencies that are willing to move forward and engage in these early detection and rapid response initiatives are paramount. We can in terms of dealing with the plant once we find it here, with something like hydrilla, there's a lot of information out there on how to deal with hydrilla. But if you don't have those coordinated agencies together, I believe you're dead in the water. It doesn't seem like a lot, just going to the lake and looking around and pulling and getting this. But we're talking about 5, 6, 7 agencies coming together and making this happen. And I think that's just kind of the key. We can do research and look up on how to deal with plants, but I think that collaboration and between the agencies and everybody coming together is really paramount.
I would have to agree. I have a question for actually both Rob and Kyle. Are there any summer employment opportunities that ISAP or at ISAP or Ducks Unlimited? And where's the best place to check in the future for these opportunities? And a follow-up to that is, what are some other skills and things that people can look into having for yeah, what are some other skills that someone may wish to look for in pursuing a job like this in the field that they may not have been taught in school, such as university or college, for example, like knowing how to trailer and things like that?
Rob, maybe I'll start off on this one. If
Sure.
Okay. So there was actually, well, I'm not going to touch on the hit squad stuff there. I think they mentioned, or the invading species awareness program stuff, but typically we do hire, in the past have hired a summer student for this type of work. Obviously COVID made things very difficult, and usually we find out kind of, typically like the jobs are posted kind of late January. Jobs start to get posted about mid to late January, and then onward from there. But a lot of it kind of gets sometimes pushed further along. We don't fully know our budgets until later on in the spring. So just keeping an eye out, just actively check on job opportunity posting boards, as well as specific websites for organizations that you want to work with. As for things to learn, that's a great question. Honestly, the biggest thing that I've run into is just having a great work ethic and wanting to learn new skills. That's really, at the core of it. If you can do that, do a little bit of homework in terms of learning more about the projects that the organization is doing, to get and it will give you an idea of the type of work. And as Darissa mentioned, like trailering and operating a boat are super helpful and super handy. But I'd say, like it is a mix of, the willingness to work in ridiculous situations out in the field. There's always things that pop up that you're not expecting. And for this type of work, you got to be okay with sticking your hands in the water. It took me a long time to get over sticking my hands in mud and not expecting a snapping turtle to nip my fingers off. So yeah, I don't know. It just takes yeah, I don't know. I'm sure Rob can probably add something a little bit better there.
Yeah, I love a can-do attitude. I think that trailering can be learned, driving a boat can be learned, all these skills can be learned, but if you just need a good attitude. I love a good attitude when I'm out doing field work. It makes the day go by fast. It makes your job fun. Obviously, you have to prepare yourself. You can do your own homework. You can do your research on what actually you're going to be doing in the field or in the job that you apply for, and you can prepare yourself. In terms of job opportunities, the Invading Species Awareness Program does have a program where we hire students. It's called the Hit Squad program. And typically there's 20 to 25 positions available across Ontario. We fell off a bit there over COVID because it was very difficult to bring it all together. But last year, I believe we did have maybe not 20, but 10 or so employees. And I think that we're looking to get back to full capacity for that. And we also have a internship that runs from through the Ontario Federation of Angus Hunters, not specifically ISAP, but this intern does come and work on the Water Soldier project with me. So just keep your eyes open on the job listings and apply for them.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a big one. Obviously, yeah, like in a lot of ways too, like, yeah, I'd say with that too, just one of the things that I'd say I come across sometimes, if you do just even a little bit of background about the organization and the project, when it comes to writing a cover letter, it does kind of help to have a little bit of background of what's going on and tailor, your skills to it. These aren't, it's one of those things where it goes a lot further in an interview as well if you did a little bit of homework. And that's kind of the big thing, and the can-do attitude. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. I wish I knew about that when I was applying for jobs.
Me too. I wish someone taught me how to do taxes in high school too.
I have one final question, I think, unless someone else pops one in the chat. But for both of you, we talked a bit, or both of you talked about kind of satellite populations or new populations showing up into different lakes and downstream from things, from a known population. How do they get there, and what can people do to kind of prevent that from happening?
So with Water Soldier, two of the major, well, the Trent Severn Waterway is a flowing system. It's a river. It has a lock system. So it just naturally wants to migrate downstream. I think some of the things that people can do is slow down when you're driving your boat around these dense populations. Wave action and wind action can dislodge these plants and send them on their way. Being aware of cleaning, draining, and drying your boat, moving your boat from water body to water body. It's actually law now. Legislation came out, and you have to remove the plants from your trailer and your boat before you move it. And this is good practices to prevent the spread from the lake to lake. So also the public can call the Invading Species Awareness Program hotline, or use edmaps.org to report sightings of invasive species. So we can keep track of them and know where they are, and determine if they're outside of their known distribution. And this can really help us. Like just with the Red Horse Lake infestation, it was just a gentleman curious, and he's like, I don't think this plant's supposed to be here. And he gave us a call, and it put the wheels into motion.
And just with that too, like that's, Rob touched on a really important point. A lot of these infestations, we're often, we're kind of focused on specific areas, or, desk bound at times too. And it's really, it's the people in the public that you're out there every day, enjoying what you do on the water or wherever. And if you're seeing these changes and it seems odd, feel free to reach out with the Invading Species hotline, and with EdMaps as well. But it's if you see something like water soldier or water chestnut, they look unlike anything you would have run into typically. So yeah, it's we really depend on the eyes and ears of the public.
Awesome. Thank you so
Maybe
much
not the ears.
Maybe not the ears. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. I don't see any more questions, and we did kind of go into lunchtime here due to the technical difficulties. So now that we've heard about aquatic invasive plants that are threatening our waterways, and about some of the work that's being done to help manage their populations, we're going to break for our lunch, and we'll resume back at 1 p.m. to hear from Victoria Feuster on the Hemlock Willie Adelgid, which is a pest threatening our forests. So with that, I'll let everyone go and eat, and we'll see you back at 1. Thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.